Hi, it's Ray Martin from myadguy.com, and I wanted to review a book that I just read. I was on a trip to San Francisco yesterday with my friend Carrie Hall, and I was on 4 flights back and forth from Kansas City in about a 24-hour period. And I picked up this book by Don Miller called A Million Miles in 1,000 Years. I'll put a link to it here on my blog, and I'll put a link to his website as well as Amazon or something like that where you could pick up this book. But this was actually given to me around Christmas time by my youth minister at Holy Trinity, Chris Walters. And yeah, it's practically May, and I'm just getting around to reading it, but I'm glad that I did. And don't let the fact that Don is a Christian or faith-based writer kind of freak you out, because this isn't a Jesus book. It has a lot of more life application in its writing. It's very real. It talks about God, but it also just talks about living a good life. And the way that Don Miller got to that was that he wrote a memoir, and apparently this memoir was really interesting. It was a New York Times bestseller, and there's a couple of movie guys that want to turn it into kind of an independent film. So they start taking creative liberties with it to try and make it more interesting, which was a little offensive to Don, because he thought that his life was really cool and interesting. But they said it just wasn't enough to really make someone want to watch it as a movie. So he kind of got to thinking that if his life really was pretty boring, then what would it take to make his story be more interesting? And what could he do in his real life going forward to make his story a little bit more interesting? So this book to me had a lot of real life application to it, but it also had a lot for me to do about advertising and telling your business's story. So I'll talk a little bit about that as well. But there are things that Don went and studied and realized that made stories interesting. And they have to have drama, and they have to have risk, and they have to have suffering. And the more risk and suffering there is, or the more that's at stake, the more interesting the story is. So that got me thinking about your business. If you're a business owner and you're trying to market and advertise to a potential client out there, and you want to tell your story, I think we all focus a lot on that. I think we focus maybe a little too much on telling our story. When I was first in radio sales, one of the first classes that I took online was called Customer Focused Selling. And it was all about making your presentations be more about the client, going out and doing an interview with the client before you just bring a sales package out, customizing your presentation that takes the focus off of you and your radio station and puts it more on the client. And something that Don talks about in this book, he quotes Viktor Frankl a lot, and he talks about us thinking about us ourselves being a tree in the forest, but we need to kind of look at the bigger picture. And he says, the forest story is better than the story of the individual tree. And that got me thinking about advertising, because businesses often want to tell their story, but to me, I think it's your customer story that's more important. So when I'm thinking about creative and maybe writing commercial copy or print copy, billboard copy, anything like that, I want to think a little bit more about the customer being the protagonist of the story, and your product or service being something that helps them overcome whatever conflict they are having in their life in order to get what they want. I think if you focus a little bit more on how you fit into their story, your customers become the forest. And you're just the tree in that forest, but you have a product or a service that can help that customer overcome whatever conflict it is in their life. Another quote that I have from the book here is that Don says advertising is a manipulation of the elements of the story. And I found that really interesting, because that's what these movie producers were trying to do. They were trying to manipulate the scenes of his life and try and put them into some sort of more exciting set of occurrences so that people would want to watch it. So my question to you as a business owner or a marketing director is, are you telling your story, or are you trying to tell an audience how you can help them in their story? I also just think in a personal way that it's important to start thinking about our own stories and whether we're living an interesting life or a boring life, if we're taking risks or not taking risks, and if we're leading a boring life, or are we doing things to make life going forward a little bit more interesting? I'd love to hear what you think about this book. Pick it up, Donald Miller, A Million Miles in 1,000 Years. You can find Don Miller on Twitter. He's at DonMillerIs, and his website is www.donmilleris.com. Leave me some comments. Let me know what you thought. I'm Ray Martin with myadguy.com. Thanks for watching.